Welcome back to the David Seaton Show. I am your host, David Seaton, and I wanted to come and talk to you today about this presidential election that's coming up between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. We are down to fewer than 60 days. This election is right around the corner, and depending upon what polls you're looking at, you'll see Kamala Harris ahead in certain states. There were some recent polls that actually came out that show that she's ahead in Pennsylvania, 4 different polls showing 4-3-2 and tied, showing that she's ahead in Michigan, showing that she's only 1 point ahead in Wisconsin. There's even talk about possibly Vice President Kamala Harris being in contention in Florida. And both of these candidates know that it's going to come down to the middle class voters, and it's also going to come down to those middle class undecided voters, and they are throwing everything, everything except the kitchen sink into this campaign in terms of promises and things that they want to give the middle class. Let's take a look first at what Kamala Harris is proposing.
We also know that as the price of housing has gone up, the size of down payments have gone up as well. Even if aspiring homeowners save for years, it often still is not enough. So in addition, while we work on the housing shortage, my administration will provide first-time home buyers with $25,000 to help with the down payment on a new home. And I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to startup small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy.
So, you see right there, Kamala Harris is talking about $50,000 for small businesses, up to $50,000 for small businesses, $6,000 in the form of a tax credit to new parents with newborn babies. Also talking about $25,000 to help people buy homes. So she's, again, creating a very populist message going to the middle class, saying, hey, if you elect me as president, this is what I am going to do for you. And Trump, not to be outdone, these are the things that he is proposing.
I will eliminate taxes on tips for restaurant workers and hospitality workers and anyone else relying on tips. No more taxes on tips. No taxes on tips.
We're not going to charge tax to Social Security, the seniors. We're not going to do it. We're not going to charge. And I'm also announcing that as part of our additional tax cuts, we will end all taxes on overtime. You know what that means? Think of that. Think of that. Think of that. That gives people more of an incentive to work. It gives the companies it's a lot easier to get the people. And, I went to some economists, great ones, and I said, what do you think? They said, it would be unbelievable. You'll get a whole new workforce by doing that. No taxes on overtime.
So you see it there. Donald Trump not holding back. He came out very early saying he was at a restaurant in Florida and he talked to a waitress. And so he came up with this idea, no tax on tips. Then he came out with no taxes on Social Security for senior citizens. And finally, his most recent tax proposal, no tax on overtime. So here's my question about both of these tax proposals from both candidates. It's very, very easy for a presidential candidate to go out on the stump and promise people, hey, these are the things that I'm going to do. I'm going to give you all of these things to try and make your life easier and to make your life better. Two problems with that. The president does not have control over the purse strings. So when a presidential candidate comes to you and says, hey, I'm going to do these things for you, they're leaving out one important fact. The legislative branch, Congress, has to actually pass these laws to give these tax credits. And more specifically, all bills that have to do with money have to originate in the House. If Kamala Harris if Vice President Kamala Harris is elected as president, she's going to need a majority of Democrats in the House to actually pass that legislation for those tax cuts and tax credits that she wants to pass. The same thing with Donald Trump. He can't do it unilaterally from the White House. He needs to have a majority of Republicans in the House to actually pass that legislation. And I'm not 100% certain that Republicans are going to necessarily pass tax cuts or say no tax on tips, no taxes on Social Security, and no taxes on overtime. Same thing with Kamala Harris. She's going to have some parts of the Democratic Party in the House that might not agree with all three of those initiatives that she's putting forward. So that leads me to the second question that no one ever asks when we hear these presidential candidates talk about these things that they want to pass. How? How are we going to pay for it? And I already know a lot of you hear me ask that question on how we're going to pay for it, and you're thinking, hey, we don't have any problem with spending billions of dollars in Afghanistan or spending billions of dollars in Ukraine, or we don't have problems with spending billions of dollars on defense. If we can spend all this money in all of these other places, then we shouldn't have a problem spending this money with the middle class. Again, there's a problem with that if that's your initial thought, and it can be summarized right here.
This is a national debt clock. It's been in New York since the late 80s, and it shows the gross national debt that we as a nation owe countries, companies, and people that lent us money, almost exclusively in the form of bonds. Back in 1989, it was just shy of $3 trillion. Today, it's north of $30 trillion. And if you look at it by household, there's a reality check, more than $300,000 owed per household. Many worry that a confluence of factors is going to send the U.S. into a debt spiral.
That's right. The national debt. The national debt is growing, has grown by orders of magnitude over the past 30 to 40 years, and it's not sustainable. We cannot continue to just spend money and not have the conversation about how we're going to pay for these things. We have to get our debt down if we want our economy, the US government's economy, to remain solvent. We are already at the point, and you can look this information up. We're already at the point where the US dollar is only the reserve currency for 60% of countries. A lot of countries are migrating over to BRICS. I'll do a separate video on BRICS. A lot of countries are not buying US bonds as aggressively as they once did. It's still one of the safest government bonds that you can buy in the world because the United States has never defaulted on a payment on US bonds. But as the debt continues to grow, as we continue to spend so much money every month where we're just paying interest on our debt, we're already spending upwards of close to $1 trillion on defense. Our entitlement programs are trillions of dollars. So there are only two options that we have. We can either cut spending or we're going to have to raise taxes. That's all you can do. Same thing in your household. If your bills in your household continue to increase and your income is not increasing, at some point you're going to have to make a decision. Do I need to get a second job? Do I need to find another source of income? Or do I need to cut spending? Because all of us have a finite budget. Whether you're a government or a person, you have a finite amount of money. Even Elon Musk, the richest man in the world as of the date and time of this recording, he has a finite amount of money. Now, he has a lot more money than all of us. He's the richest person in the world. But even he can't write a check for $1 trillion. He has a finite amount of money. And we have to make a decision as a country where we are going to prioritize our spending and where we are going to prioritize tax cuts and tax credits and what makes the most sense in the long term if we want this economy to remain viable, if we want our standard of living and our position on the global stage to remain where it is. I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are, so you can comment below. Feel free to follow, comment, subscribe. I'm going to continue to make this content for you, especially between now and the election. And like I said, do me a favor, follow my channel. That helps us grow, that helps us with the algorithm. I look forward to the next time. The next video that we're going to be doing is going to be very soon. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.